Hello everyone, welcome to Vue.js Global. Before we start, a little bit about myself. I'm Rahul. I'm a Vue.js core team member. I work mostly on compiler and other toolings part of the ecosystem. I also work at Grammarly as a software engineer. So without further ado, let's get started with today's topic, my experience with the new Vue. Yeah, I'm going to talk about how I've been using Vue 3 and its ecosystem and what are the possibilities. I would be focusing mainly on three aspects of the new ecosystem, particularly the composition API, compiler, and a new build tool, Vite. Let's get started with composition API. I suppose you already have learned a lot about composition API and have a fair idea what it is and how it works. I'll take another aspect of composition API and let's look at the TypeScript support. TypeScript support in Vue 3 is much better. And that's really good news for TypeScript users. But JavaScript users also enjoy the benefits, as all the IDs like VS Code or Atom use type definitions from Vue to provide intelligence, and developer experience is definitely going to be better with Vue 3. All that is possible because of composition API and the discussions and the API discussions started in the beginning. Other than TypeScript support, there is a new independence. Composition API works same in or out of a component. It's completely decoupled from Vue's component lifecycle, which means now you can use it anywhere you want. That makes it very refactorable since it can be written without dependence on component, without depending on the component lifecycle. You can move your composition functions out of your component and still use them. And it's going to create an era of new reusable functionalities. You can share smaller functionality instead of sharing the whole component. And since composition API doesn't face all the shortcomings of mixins, which was actually the previous way of sharing code between components. Here, composition API doesn't face all the shortcomings, so it's very easy to share code between projects. Let's see how community is using composition API. Let's look at first ViewRouter. So in ViewRouter, earlier we used to add special component options for handling when a route is actually leaving. Now you can put this thing in a setup function, and good thing is that you can refactor it out into a separate composition function and reuse it anywhere. You can find more about how ViewRouter is using composition API in Eduardo's talk here at Vuejs Global. Next, let's look at Vuex. So TypeScript support in Vuex has been a problem. The initial design of the state management library was not very type friendly. In its new iteration, Kia is using composition API's type support and building upon it. Along with it, he is trying to create an API which is very similar to how we write components. If you look at the store, it has state, which is very similar to data, the data function in our components. Then getters are similar to computed properties. And then actions are like methods. And we can access them in a type safe manner. You can know more about this in Kia's talk, The Future of UX, here at Vuejs Global. Finally, I want to mention this repository Vue use. It's a collection of dozens of composition functions, like very common and reusable functionalities like getting the mouse position, or if user prefers dark mode or light mode, or using local storage in a reactive manner. So this this has dozens of such composition function, and like you can reuse them in your project. Also, you can refactor them and create your own composition functions. Possibilities are endless. I ask you to check out this repository if you use to take some inspiration or use them in your project directly. How I have been using Composition API is slightly different. So I maintain this VS Code extension for Grammarly. So this extension checks grammar error in Markdown files. How it works is it spins up a language server. So in if you want to provide some features in using VS Code extension, you can create a language server. In similar manner, this extension spins up a grammar language server, and this language server talks to the Grammarly server, which is actually sending all the alerts in all the grammar alerts in our document. And it's responsibility of this language server to forward them in a manner in which VS Code understands. To do this, I was using an event emitter, like Node's event emitter API, and it was getting really complicated with lots of callbacks and all. I thought, let's give it a try. Let's use Composition API. So I'm using Vue's reactivity package, which is a smaller API uh, of what all we get in Composition API. But this package doesn't depend on component lifecycle or like you can use it anywhere. You can use it without Vue. So let's look this snippet line by line. So I'm importing ref and creating alerts ref. So I would be storing all the alerts in this array. And I have a client to the Grammarly WebSocket. Whenever I get an alert on that WebSocket, I'll post them to this alerts array. Now I can register a watcher, and this watcher will watch this array. Whenever this array changes, it'll send diagnostic to VS Code. Seamless. Though there's a slight problem. Watch function is not available as part of your reactivity because watch depends on component lifecycle. So we have to write our own watch function. Let's do that. We'll use effect from reactivity package. Effect is like it takes a reactive object and you can have an effect. Basically, whenever the state changes, you can have some function or some callback to be executed. So let's implement our watch function. So to implement watch function, we need to provide a getter and a scheduler to the effect function. So let's write the getter first. So getter, when this getter is called, the effect would be tracking all the dependencies so that it can rerun when those dependencies change. So in this, we assume that this watch function works only with refs. So we are getting the value from this ref and returning it in this getter. Now our ref is watchable. Though if you change any of the alerts, like any of the array items, then it won't trigger the watcher because they are not registered as dependency. Only the top level array is registered. So to make every item watchable, we will iterate through this array. That makes our getter. Next, we need to write a scheduler. Scheduler is basically whenever the value changes, like scheduler basically triggers our watcher. So in this one, let's skip over this first and let's try to create an effect. So in effect, we pass the getter and a scheduler, and it will return as a function like object, which we can call to get the latest value and more functionalities on it. So in the scheduler, we'll use this runner to get the latest value. And we can, here we have the latest value. Now we can call the callback we need the previous value. Like as Vue's watch API works, like it provides us current value and previous value. So we can declare a local variable which is undefined at the beginning, and we call the callback. After callback is done, we assign this variable with the current value. That is the scheduler. But we can trigger schedule immediately after registering, so we can call this thing manually. And after this, when we call this scheduler manually, we are registering all the dependencies, and whenever the dependencies are changed, this effect will call our scheduler, and that will call our callback function. This is very much same how Vue implements the watch function. The slight difference is Vue knows when to stop this watcher. Basically, when your component unmounts, you can stop the watcher. In our case, we don't have component lifecycle, so we want to provide this action to the user. So in our API, we return a function with which will call runner.stop, basically stopping the effect. So this is passed back to the caller of the watch function, and control is given to the user to stop when they want to stop the watcher. That's all. And we can see how this thing works in action. So yeah, let's look at this demo. As soon as alerts are coming, they are updated in VS Code's UI. And when you fix an issue, it updates the number of alerts left. Basically, both VS Code and our language server are in sync. If you want to look at the source code, you can check out the GitHub repository. Is on my account, jnck/grammarly. This is the composition API. Simple reactivity beyond limits, which works in and out of your components. Next, we have is the compiler. So compiler has been built from scratch to meet the requirements of Vue, particularly source map support, static optimizations. And static optimization is in fact a big part of the new compiler. The compiler tries to understand source code. So to do that, it converts into an abstract syntax tree. It's like a blueprint of your source code. And from that, it analyzes which parts of this tree are static. Basically, we are not using any reactive state, and extract them or hoist them in such a manner that in multiple re-renders, same virtual nodes or same instances of these elements are reused. This gives immense performance benefits, but static optimization is not possible always. In scenarios when static optimization is not possible, it tries to detect some hints, like you have a component which has 2 slots and both the slots are rendered every time. This kind of hints are collected at the compile time and passed and basically stored in the generated render function as a hint for runtime. Runtime uses these hints to skip over unnecessary work. Call this runtime or compiler fast paths. Basically, skip unnecessary work and do exactly what is required, because we already know what kind of structure or what kind of render function we are expecting here. These are the direct benefits of the new compiler. And yes, we got source map support also. So the compiler is written in a very customizable manner. It's a generic HTML parser or processor. And in fact, like all the features of the default Vue compiler are implemented as plugins. We call compiler plugins as transforms, because they take in an AST and transform in a different variant of AST. So this customizability makes it usable in various scenarios. One example is Vue 18. if you have used Vue 18, you know the Vue 18 provides a directive, VT directive. This directive accepts a key from your messages, and at, at runtime, it takes that key and returns the actual message. So you can have multiple locales in your application. However, with new compiler, you can do this thing at compile time. You can configure a locale and build with Vue i18's compiler transform. This transform would generate a render function in the configured language. Let's say you want to build your JavaScript bundle for English. You'll set English and you get a render function like this on the right. If you set to Japanese, your render function output will change. You will get a render function out with the Japanese strings. And this is very powerful. Which means you can separate bundles to your users depending upon like what locale they prefer. This also reduces the runtime overhead of Vue IET since everything is already done at compile time. These are simple scenarios, and like Vue 18 is doing so many things. You can check out Kazupon's repository there and look at what else he's doing. Vite is also using new compiler. As I told, Vue compiler is a general purpose HTML parser or transformer. Vite uses it to take your index.html and extract all the script block so that it can process them or compile them in a manner a browser can understand. You can look at Vite source code if you want. I'm also using compiler in a slightly different manner. So I've been working with Typescript support, basically ID support for Vue.js. In all the IDs, mainly VS Code, uses a TypeScript language server to support IntelliSense and refactoring and all the features of TypeScript. How it does is this language server communicates with the VS Code window, and it requests information about the file or what actions you can take at the current line. It works for TypeScript and JavaScript file, but TypeScript language server doesn't recognize Vue file, and that has been a problem. Vueter is dealing this thing. Vueter, the VS Code extension for Vue, has been dealing this thing by spawning up a separate TypeScript language server, which works in .vue files. And we have seen like it works effortlessly in .vue file. But whenever you try to use a Vue file in a TypeScript file or a JavaScript file, that level, the level of features or functionalities provided TypeScript language server or Vueter are gone suddenly. However, we can implement it in a way like TypeScript language server supports plugin. A plugin acts like an interceptor between VS Code and the language server. Here we can intercept our request coming for Vue file, transform the Vue file in a way so that it's understandable by the TypeScript language server. Let's take an example. We have the simple component. And if we look at the compiler output of this component, you get a render function like this. If we pass this render function to TypeScript language server, it will understand and provide meaningful information for us. However, it's quite difficult to reposition all those alerts to our template because the template and the generated code are very different. If we could somehow repurpose the compiler to output a code, output a render function, which is very close to our template, it's easier to map all the alerts or issues provided by TypeScript language server to our template. And that's what I'm doing here. I have created a compiler which output TSX instead of JavaScript render function. And I have a demo for you But before that, you can, if you want to check source code, you can check here. Vue developer experience is a collection of tools I am experimenting with to enhance the experience of writing Vue.js with VS Code particularly. Let's look at the demo. So here we have a component and its corresponding render function is displayed on the right. You see this render function is tsx, and one of the major pain which has been in Vue is like importing from .vue files, but you can import like this. You can import from .vue file all the named exports, and it works seamlessly. It detects the types and all. Let's take this render function is generated on the fly. As soon as you type something, it's generated and sent to the TS language server. So it has the latest version of this, and uh, all the TypeScript language feature will theoretically work here. This is just a sneak peek. There's much more to come, and I would be presenting a detailed talk about how TS plugin is working in future. So this has been the compiler. It's a super customizable tool you can use to enhance developer experience in Vue components or in Vue projects, or you can create your own tools like Vite is using it. Ah, that's the compiler. Let's look at our third tool, Vite. It's a build tool. It's a build tool, which means it's like Webpack or Rollup or Partial JS, but it's very different from all these three. It's a build tool of new era. I'll say it's very revolutionary how it's doing compilation. It does compilation on demand, which means when you browse a page and browser will send some request for JavaScript files, and on the fly it will process and serve JavaScript files. However, it works with modern browsers which support native ES modules, which is like all the modern browsers, Chrome, Firefox, or Chromium Best, Edge, Safari, and all. But due to this on-demand compilation, a Vite service, a Vite dev server starts instantly, and it provides instant HMR. The moment you save a file, it's hot reloaded in the browser within seconds. And this scales with the size of your project. Doesn't matter you have 100 files or 200 files, the experience is going to remain same. Plus, Vite is again very customizable. Vite is built like an HTTP server. It's a COA-based server which processes incoming requests on the fly using ES build. So it gives us an opportunity to customize it to serve different experiences. One of the example is VitePress. VitePress is very similar to how VuePress works, but without the downsides of VuePress. As Vite processes resources on demand, so a documentation website with around 200 or 500 pages will take exactly same amount of time as a documentation website with, let's say, 2 pages, because it will render only the required page during development cycle. You can check out more about VitePress in the GitHub repository you can find on Vue's account. I have been using Vite slightly differently, in a manner like very similar to VitePress, but for a different purpose. I am working on this tool called Preview. Think Preview as a storybook where you don't have to configure or even write the stories, which works out of the box without any configuration. So let's say you have a Vue 3 project, a Vite-based Vue 3 project. How do you run preview? You can run npx Vue.js preview, which is the package where preview is published, and it will spin up a Vite server, which will look through all the components in your project and create a storybook-like list of components where you can browse. Another amazing feature of this thing is when you save a file in your IDE, it will switch to that component. So if you are working on multiple components, you can hit Command S and it will switch to that component. And you don't even have to go to the browser to see the changes. They instantly reflect there. There's so many things possible with this approach, and I've been exploring it. If you are interested, you can look at the source code and on my GitHub repo, /preview. It's a experimental work in very early stage, but I see lots of promise here, and I hope this tool can help you in your Vue development. If you want to give it a try, you can run npx Vue.dx/preview on your project without any configuration. It will start a dev server, and you can start building. You don't even have to write any stories or configuration. Though there's a requirement, it works only with Vue 3 and Vite. So this is Vite, a customizable build tool that works seamlessly and processes the output file on the fly so that you get instant HMR and instant development server startup. These are the tools, the Composition API, compiler, and Vite of the new Vue. Each of them controls a specific stage in a development lifecycle of a Vue application. Composition API controls the runtime. It has given us powers to write reactive code in and out of a component. Then the compiler processes our templates, our Vue files at compile time, generates optimized render function, and so many things with its customizable API. Then Vite works at the build time or the development time. So Vite can start an development server instantly and provide instant HMR for any size of project. These three tools enable immense possibilities, and I encourage you to build using these three tools. And if you build something, please do share it with me. You can tweet at me at JenSikit0. And if I love your tool, I'll share with the community. Thanks a lot. This has been my experience of the new Vue, and I'm looking forward to hear about your experiences. Thank you.